Palo Alto, California, the heart of Silicon Valley, a place where billion-dollar companies are born in garages, where Stanford dropouts become legends, where the impossible becomes reality. In 2014, one company seemed to embody all of that. Theranos promised to revolutionize medicine with a simple finger prick, a few drops of blood that could detect hundreds of diseases in minutes. At its helm stood Elizabeth Holmes, a 19-year-old dropout who became the world's youngest self-made female billionaire, worth $5 billion on paper. She wore black turtlenecks like Steve Jobs. She spoke in an unnaturally deep voice. She recruited former secretaries of state to her board. She convinced Walgreens, Safeway, and investors to pour in over $700 million. But behind the glossy magazine covers and TED Talks, something was terribly wrong. Patients received false cancer diagnoses. Women got incorrect pregnancy results. Someone was told they had HIV when they didn't. The technology, the revolutionary Edison machine, didn't work. And everyone at the top knew it. This is the story of how one woman built a $9 billion empire on a lie so audacious it fooled some of the smartest people in America, and how it all came crashing down. Before we dive deep into one of the biggest frauds in Silicon Valley history, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. You won't want to miss what happens next. Elizabeth Ann Holmes was born on February 3, 1984, in Washington, D.C. Her father worked at Enron, yes, that Enron, before its spectacular collapse. Perhaps she learned something from that. As a child, Holmes was obsessed with achievement. In her high school yearbook at St. John's School in Houston, she wrote, "I tend to be a perfectionist, so sometimes I'm up really late." She got into Stanford University. At 19, during her sophomore year in 2003, she had an idea. What if you could run comprehensive blood tests using just a few drops of blood from a finger prick, instead of drawing multiple vials from a vein? She dropped out of Stanford and used the education trust from her parents to found the company that would later be called Theranos, derived from therapy and diagnosis. Holmes wasn't just building a company, she was building a persona. In meetings, she lowered the pitch of her voice and wore shoulder pads to come across as more authoritative. She wore black turtlenecks in photographs and adopted several health-related quirks, including drinking green juice. The media ate it up. She was compared to Steve Jobs constantly. Silicon Valley had never had a self-made female billionaire. There was a hunger for this narrative, and Holmes knew exactly how to feed it. In 2009, she brought in Ramesh Sunny Balwani as president and COO. He was 19 years older than her. They were secretly in a romantic relationship, a fact they hid from investors and the board. Balwani had no scientific background whatsoever. Together, they instituted extreme measures of secrecy. Employees in different departments couldn't talk to each other. The lab was hidden behind badge access doors. Like Jobs, she instituted intensive measures of secrecy and security regarding most aspects of production. But secrecy wasn't just about protecting trade secrets. It was about hiding the truth. By 2014, Theranos claimed its proprietary device, called the Edison, could run over 240 tests from a single finger prick of blood. Tests for cholesterol, cancer markers, infectious diseases, hormone levels, all of it. Test results could be delivered to a patient's phone in hours, and a single test would cost less than half of the reimbursement rate of Medicare and Medicaid. In September 2013, Theranos partnered with Walgreens to open wellness centers inside stores. In 2014, Forbes named Holmes the youngest self-made female billionaire in America, with a net worth of $5 billion. She appeared on magazine covers. She gave interviews. She was celebrated. But inside the Palo Alto headquarters, employees were terrified. Because they knew the truth. Dr. Adam Rosendorf was Theranos's laboratory director from 2013 to 2014. He had a problem. The Edison machines kept producing wildly inconsistent results. Quality control tests were failing. Proficiency tests, required by federal regulators, were being manipulated. Rosendorf revealed that Theranos was cheating on regulatory proficiency tests and falsifying patient results. He raised concerns. Repeatedly. Balwani's response? He belittled Rosendorf's grasp of basic mathematics and his knowledge of laboratory science. Rosendorf wasn't alone. Tyler Schultz, grandson of former Secretary of State George Shultz, a Theranos board member, worked in the lab. He saw the same problems. He went to Holmes directly with his concerns about data manipulation. Holmes forwarded the email to Balwani, who belittled Schultz's grasp of basic mathematics and his knowledge of laboratory science, and then took a swipe at his relationship with George Shultz. The only reason I have taken so much time away from work to address this personally is because you are Mr. Schultz's grandson, Balwani wrote. Tyler Schultz quit that same day. As he was leaving Theranos' headquarters in Palo Alto, he got a frantic cell phone call from his mother, who told him Holmes had just called the elder George Shultz to warn that his grandson would lose if he launched a vendetta against the blood testing company. Another employee, Erica Chung, approached Balwani about erroneous test results. Instead of taking Chung seriously, he cast doubt on her competence. After she left the organization in disillusionment, Theranos threatened her with legal action. This was the pattern: raise concerns, get intimidated, get threatened with lawsuits. But two people decided they wouldn't stay silent. Tyler Schultz and Erica Chung became whistleblowers. They reached out to a reporter at the Wall Street Journal. His name was John Carreyrou. Meanwhile, something else was happening that Theranos couldn't control. Real patients were getting real results. And those results were dangerously wrong. Patients were misdiagnosed with everything from diabetes to cancer. Theranos sent out inaccurate results to patients being screened for cancer, to women monitoring their pregnancies, and to one victim who was led to believe she had the precursor virus to AIDS. Lives were being put at risk. And the people at the top, they knew, and they kept going. If this investigation is gripping you, hit that like button now and share this video. The next chapter reveals how everything unraveled. Stay with us. In April 2015, John Carreyrou, an investigative reporter for the Wall Street Journal, received a tip from a Missouri-based pathologist who doubted Holmes's descriptions of her technology. Carreyrou started digging. He reached out to former employees. One by one, they started talking. Dr. Adam Rosendorf was Carreyrou's first and most important source. What Rosendorf revealed was stunning. Theranos was not using its own technology to run the majority of its tests due to the inefficiency of its own technology. Instead, they were using commercially available machines from companies like Siemens, machines everyone else in the industry used. They were just diluting the tiny blood samples, which made the results even less accurate. Less than 1% of the company's tests were performed on its own devices in commercial settings, contradicting public assertions of revolutionary miniaturization. The Edison machine, the supposedly revolutionary technology, barely worked. Carreyrou spent months verifying everything, talking to over a dozen former employees, cross-checking documents. Holmes found out about the investigation. She went on the offensive. She hired David Boies, one of the most feared lawyers in America, to threaten Carreyrou and his sources with lawsuits. Theranos' legal counsel, David Boies, threatened the reporter with lawsuits. Holmes acknowledged she hired Boies Schiller Flexner after she learned Chung was talking to Carreyrou, saying she was trying to prevent Chung from disclosing company trade secrets. But Holmes didn't stop there. She had a direct line to Rupert Murdoch, who had invested $125 million in Theranos earlier that year. Murdoch also owned the Wall Street Journal. In September 2015, Holmes sent an email to Murdoch referencing Gerard Baker, who was then the journal's editor-in-chief. "We are very much hoping that Gerard will meet with our team," Holmes wrote. She was trying to kill the story. Murdoch refused. He said he trusted the paper's editors to handle the matter fairly. On October 16, 2015, Carrie Rue's investigation was published on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. The headline, "A Prized Startup Struggles." The article exposed everything. Holmes's response? Returning to the company's headquarters in Palo Alto, she and Balwani addressed a meeting of their staff and fiercely denied the article's claims. Hundreds of employees stood up and started chanting, "Fuck you, Carrie Rue! Fuck you, Carrie Rue!" But the damage was done. The FDA launched investigations. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services opened probes. Partners like Walgreens started demanding answers. And more stories kept coming. Carrie Rue published follow-up after follow-up, each one more damning than the last. By December 2015 and into 2016, Carrie Rue's series uncovered a pattern of intimidation against employees who raised concerns, including threats of lawsuits under non-disclosure agreements and surveillance of staff communications. The empire was collapsing. By July 2016, federal regulators had seen enough. CMS notified Theranos that the company had failed to provide adequate documentation, showing that it had corrected its previous errors and was complying with federal regulations, and thus CMS blocked Theranos from receiving reimbursements from Medicare and Medicaid and forbade Holmes from possessing or operating a medical laboratory for 2 years. The Walgreens partnership crumbled. Safeway sued. Investors demanded repayment. At its height in 2015, Theranos had more than 800 employees. It dismissed 340 people in October 2016 and an additional 155 in January 2017. Forbes revised Holmes's net worth from $4.5 billion to zero. In March 2018, the Securities and Exchange Commission charged Holmes and Balwani with massive fraud. According to the SEC, Theranos, Holmes, and Balwani made numerous false and misleading statements in investor presentations, product demonstrations, and media articles by which they deceived investors into believing that its key product could conduct comprehensive blood tests from finger drops of blood, revolutionizing the blood testing industry. The charges included the company's false claim that its technology was being used by the U.S. Department of Defense in combat situations. The company also lied when it claimed to have a $100 million revenue stream in 2014. That year, the company only made $100,000. Holmes settled with the SEC, paying a $500,000 fine and surrendering control of the company. But the criminal charges were just beginning. On June 15, 2018, a federal grand jury indicted Holmes and Balwani on 9 counts of wire fraud and 2 counts of conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Prosecutors alleged that Holmes and Balwani engaged in 2 criminal schemes, one to defraud investors, the other to defraud doctors and patients. That same day, Holmes stepped down as CEO. In September 2018, Theranos ceased operations entirely. Holmes's trial began on August 31, 2021. It lasted 4 months. During testimony, Holmes admitted she tried to get Rupert Murdoch to kill the Wall Street Journal story, telling the jury, "It was part of my effort to get Mr. Murdoch to make sure our trade secrets are not published." She claimed she was manipulated and abused by Balwani, a defense that didn't fully convince the jury. On January 3, 2022, Holmes was convicted on 4 counts of defrauding investors, 3 counts of wire fraud, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud. The jury found her not guilty on 4 counts of defrauding patients, and it failed to reach a verdict on the remaining counts. On November 18, 2022, she was sentenced to 135 months, 11 years and 3 months, in federal prison. She and Balwani were ordered to pay $452 million in restitution to the victims of the fraud. Holmes began serving her prison sentence on May 30, 2023, at Federal Prison Camp, Bryan. Balwani was tried separately, convicted on all 12 counts, and sentenced to 12 years and 11 months in prison. So how did this happen? How did Elizabeth Holmes fool some of the smartest investors, most experienced doctors, and most powerful politicians in America? Technology consultant Paul Sappho said, "There is one cardinal rule in Silicon Valley that most people never realize, and this is never ever breathe your own exhaust." Holmes is someone who is so deeply self-deluded by her optimism and faith in herself. And delusion is contagious. She believed her own hype, and she convinced everyone else to believe it too. But at its core, Theranos wasn't just about overconfidence or ambition. As the government described, her scheme not only deprived investors of vast sums of money, it also placed numerous others at risk of great physical harm. Real people received false diagnoses. Real lives were put at risk, all for the sake of an image, a brand, a story. The Theranos scandal is a reminder. When innovation meets deception, when secrecy becomes a weapon, and when ego drowns out truth, everyone loses. If this investigation opened your eyes to the dark side of Silicon Valley, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the scandals that shook the world. Drop a comment. What other corporate frauds should we investigate next? Thanks for watching.